So, hello and welcome everyone to this session titled Tracking Outcomes of Global Climate and Water Conferences. This is the third and final session of this seminar series. My name is Mustafa Bayoumi. I'm a climate change research fellow at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy, and I'm based in the UAE, where the next UN Water Conference in 2026 will be taking place. The seminar series focuses on water and climate conference outcomes. In the sessions that we've had, we've looked at the past, reflecting on what the outcomes have been, but also we've looked forward and looking at aspirations at what do we expect and what do we actually want from those conference, and how do they link together, and how do they relate to the regional and local level action. In this session, we will focus more on case studies and solutions to improve accountability and follow up from conferences to achieve water and climate targets. In the two sessions that we've had, we've covered quite a lot. We had one high-level event and one workshop. Some of the main points have been that water and climate go hand in hand. They can't be tackled separately, and we cannot try to take action thinking of silos anymore. We need to integrate them together. There also was the point that we need further involvement from a larger pool of experts, from more government representatives, and there is a need to link the water sector with other sectors as well. We also heard that we have the tools, we have data, we have expertise, but how do we combine all those together to ensure meaningful action? In yesterday's session at the workshop, we also covered how to scale up finance for water and climate action. How do we look at bottom-up collective action partnerships? How does the regional level connect to the global level? And also, what role does evidence play in terms of pushing forward action on both water and climate? Many of the speakers and the participants also shared their aspirations in terms of looking at clear commitments that will come out from the next conferences. What kind of impact do we see on the ground? Better accountability, legal frameworks, among other points. And with that, I would like to hand over to Leah Crank-Jones, who will guide us through an interactive poll.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mustafa. Very quick, just a little piece of housekeeping. So during this session, we have a lot of presenters, and so we're not going to have a formal Q&A session during the session. So if you have any questions for any of the speakers, please put those in the chat. And I ask that all the presenters, after you finish your presentation, to please monitor the chat and see if anyone is asking you any specific questions so that you're able to respond with written responses in the chat. So with that, we're going to start off with a Mentimeter with an audience poll. So let me just transition to that now. So if you go to menti.com and enter this code, or you can scan that QR code, it will start our first one question poll that we'll have at the beginning of the session. And then at the end of the session, we'll have another poll as well. I'll give you about 20 or so more seconds. Okay, so our question for this starting off poll is, what word best describes your hope for the 2026 UN Water Conference? And if you didn't grab that QR code on the last slide, you can go to menti.com and use that code that's in little numbers across the top. So we're seeing implementation and innovation kind of coming in quite a bit in the middle. but also action, commitments, um, the role of finance or financing, actionable, accountability as well, targets, progress. Wonderful. So we hope that as we go through our presentations today, that we'll be able to have some dialogue and discussion about how we might think about practically bringing these pieces into the UN 2026 Water Conference, as well as into future water and climate meetings. So with that, I'll go back to our main slide deck and hand it back to Mustafa to introduce our speakers, or our first speaker.
Thank you so much, Leah. And with that, we'll move on to our next part of the session, which is the lightning presentations. We have two sets of presentations. The first one is going to be on solutions from water basins and indigenous perspectives. The first speaker out of three for that part will be Mr. German Bejenaro. He's the head of Water Resources Management section at EPEL Moldove, National Administration and Nestor Commission. Mr. German, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. First of all, I should mention it's a great pleasure to be here, even online, because this event is very important for probably for everybody and for my country, of course. I need to share my screen. Hope do you see? But please confirm it's visible, my screen.
Yes, yes, we see
Okay.
your screen.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I should say a few words, from a few introduction words. The Dniester Basin is one of the most advanced basins in transboundary climate adaptation. In particular, as a strategic framework for climate change adaptation was developed and endorsed by Moldova and Ukraine back in almost 10 years in 2016. In the next years, the strategic framework will be revised with support of GEF, UNDP, OSHE, and ONUC. The Water Convention played a crucial role in developing this strategic framework and in facilitating overall support in transboundary cooperation in the Dniester Basin. In early 2025, 10 years after strategic framework was developed, UNECE supported the update of the climate scenario for the Dniester Basin based on the request from countries. The work was done by a common Moldavian-Ukrainian group of experts, and I'm going to present the result of this research today on behalf of our team. In addition to the research itself, we have developed the maps so that the results are visible and easy to understand. Just 1 second, I will show our results. So, in principle, we have a huge scientific report. We have a second part of, let me say, extract for decision-making factors. I mean, short version of this huge report. But now I want to show you as idea a mini atlas. It was made in QGIS. There is a special plugin QGIS2 app. It's leaflet. And we put all our results in map. How it works? In the right upside, it's a legend. You can see layers. Now I presented a RCP scenario for 4 and 5, so it's medium scenario. We have this application in two language because it's transboundary river. We have in Romanian and in Ukraine. I present this in Romanian, but probably it's simple to understand because it's very common. First group of layer, it's average temperature year for a whole year, winters, spring, summer, and autumn. I will put a beef and remove a beef. And if we put our cursor to some water body sector, it's a sector for water management. for Holy Basin, for two countries, we can see how temperature will change at the middle of century. I have no time to explain for each water body how it will be exactly temperature, or if we want minimal temperature for whole years, for winter, for spring, for summer, and for autumn. And at the end, no, I should show, of course, precipitation for year. All of them is decrease. All of them is decrease for year precipitation from year, from winter, from spring, summer, and autumn. But finally, we develop a change of flow. Average annual flow in the Dniester basin. You can see in upper part of basin it's little increasing, but the down part it's dramatically. In my country, in Moldova, we will have almost 30% minus in water flow. It's annual. We can see in winter, spring, summer, and autumn. I will repeat again. I have no time, not enough time in 5 minutes to analyze how our result, but everybody, I mean, beneficiary of this engine, can analyzing and understand himself what will be happen, even by color or by written number for each sector of water management. This engine will be placed in both sites, I mean web page of water agency from Moldova and from Ukraine, and everybody can access very free, of course, very quick, analyzing and understand to taking some decision. I will repeat again. My scope of this short presentation, it's not our result inside, because everybody who are interested can open a report and read very carefully, all detailed about climate change and changing in flow of Dniester River. But simple people sometimes haven't time to read, haven't time to understand what is written, but very easy can understand by color. In principle, that's all. Thank you, and I will happy to answer all the questions. I will stop my share. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you very much for your presentation. That was very insightful. I now pass it on to Sergio Sito, who's the Executive Director of Limpopo Watercourse Commission. The floor is yours.
No. Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that I also asking or questioning if some of you have ever heard about a child who was born on the top of a tree. Flood event in the 2000. In a river basin called Limpopo River Basin. So this is where I'm coming from. This is the institution that I work for. So that river basin is shared by 4 riparian states: Botswana, Mozambique, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. And it's the third largest river basin in Southern Africa. And it has a mean runoff, annual runoff of about 500 and millimeters per annum. And it has a population of about 20 million people. It's a home for almost 20 million people, and it's mostly dry, particularly from the Mozambican side until Botswana, where it sits almost in the Kalahari Desert. So, as you can see, that's a very problematic river basin with a number of challenges. water availability. We do have also problems on related to disaster management, and also linked to infrastructure development, particularly when you look to Mozambique, who's sitting in the last part of the river basin, and its territory is almost flat, no suitable sites for infrastructure development. So, in terms of water resource management,
Sergio, I think we lost you. Are you still there?
day management and assisting and advising the member states in
I think we lost the connection with Sergio. Shall we maybe perhaps move to the next speaker as we reconnect with Sergio? Okay, let's move to Dr. Yolanda Lopez Maldonado. Sergio is back.
yeah.
Yeah, please continue.
So I was saying that with all those challenges, then we came with a strategic plan that we're implementing currently, and these assist the member states to address all priorities in their parts of the basin. Or allocation is also always done in a kind of a consensus, a lose and take. So, there's no win here, there's no loser. So we all need to make sure that we negotiate in such a way that we all win. And if one is benefiting, the other can't, we'll let to see how best can the benefits that is arising from that negotiation can benefit the others. So that's the approach that we're undertaking. And allow me to say that one of the critical issues that we deal with is a flood and droughts, the disaster management related issues. So we had to come up with a broader early warning system for the basin, which then we had to assist the member states and communicate how best what is happening in each of the region and in the basin, so that they prepare themselves. Preparedness plan are always done by ourselves, including the member states. We do have a kind of pre and post season meetings just to see how best we can improve, the accountability or even monitoring of water resources. We developed a tool which a Limpopo information management system, where we all have access, and linking it to innovative tools that we come up with a digital twin prototype, which has been developed with assistance of the Institute of Water Management based in South Africa, and that help us to monitor the basin in kind of a real time. On that, I see the previous speaker was just showing how you change things quickly. The digital tool does the same, but it tells you, it gives you, information on all the different subjects. If you want to know about temperature, rainfall, what's all those, it gives you just in a simple touch, and it tells you what is going to happen. It simulates, in case of rainfall, it simulates what is going to happen downstream, and what, depending on the magnitude of the rain that is falling, you can know what are going to be the implication, and then you start to prepare yourselves. So we are doing a lot in terms of making sure that we include our stakeholders. All the local communities are trained. They do have their own indigenous knowledge. They also share with us what means, for instance, if you see any type of animal in the basin in terms of what is really going to happen in that particular season, instrument that leads us to a kind of proper monitoring and evaluate where we are in terms of water resource and how best can it then serve the population in the basin. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergio. And I think despite the technical issues, we still got quite a lot of what you wanted to share and the important messages that you pointed out. I move on to Dr. Renat Yolanda Lopez Maldonado. She's the founder of Indigenous Science. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I know that time is limited, so I will try to summarize some important points from an Indigenous perspective. I will talk a little bit about Indigenous knowledge and how Indigenous knowledge can transform water and climate governance, and of course, how Indigenous peoples we can influence global water agendas. Next slide, please. So we are talking today about how move forward this global water and climate conference and discussions. And allow me first to say that in the past, like let's say less than 10 years or a little bit around 10 years, we Indigenous peoples we were almost absent of all those conferences and negotiations. And we all agree that global conference set ambitious targets for water and climate action. So it is important to keep accountability and implementations very consistent, because this is really difficult. And for a real progress, diverse actors are needed. So with over the years, Indigenous peoples, we have been more, we have had more presence on those dialogues and those conferences. And it is important to recognize that we Indigenous peoples, we can contribute meaningfully in those forums. And when I say contribute, there are two types of contributions, and this is something I always emphasize. So we can have active and passive contribution, or active and passive participation, and I will explain a little bit more in the next slides. But it's important to recognize that we Indigenous peoples, we need to be considered for all those important global environmental frameworks, because we are talking about water, we are talking about climate change, about resources, and we all, but especially Indigenous peoples, we depend completely on our biosphere and our resources as well. But there are, of course, several obstacles that we have been facing over the years in accessing those spaces in which decisions are made without our participation, without our knowledge and our opinion. And these have an impact on our daily lives, because our knowledge gets completely excluded from social justice and effective policies. For example, we Indigenous peoples, we have faced many water insecurity issues. Our rights have been violated, but I don't want to focus on the negative parts. I want to bring today a positive aspect, or a pathway that we can follow in order to understand the value and the importance of indigenous knowledge into framing and building a global water agenda together with other stakeholder or knowledge holders. So I want to emphasize 2 points here, that for real inclusion, we really need to move from rhetoric to reality. And many of those global frameworks and global conferences, they need to, at some point in the future, they need to work along with us, because we are talking about the protection of a resource that sustains our lives as humans and as a species. Policies should guarantee our participation in water decision making and recognize as well not only our knowledge on managing water resources, but also that we indigenous peoples, we confer a different superiority to water resources, a unique spiritual and ecological connection to this resource. Also, it's important to recognize the role of indigenous women and youth as knowledge keepers of water and as educators. Next slide, please. And I want to emphasize this deep connection we indigenous peoples we have to water, because this is nothing new. This is I hope you don't romanticize my words. Indigenous peoples from all around the world, we have this cultural and spiritual connection to water resources, and I think this is an important aspect to consider, specifically during those very challenging times in which water security and conflicts related to water are abound. And I want to also emphasize that it's not only these cultural and spiritual values to water that has helped us to protect and to value this resource for centuries. Is also because we indigenous peoples, we have these sophisticated and empirically grounded observations and understanding of natural phenomena. And this is something some call it traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous knowledge, but I frame it here as indigenous science because it's very precise, unique, and important for understanding the functioning of Earth systems, in particular water systems. But despite this precision and accuracy, our indigenous observations are largely marginalized from those global events, those global environmental monitoring frameworks, and scientific discourse. So essentially, it is important to start to look at our indigenous knowledge, indigenous science, and also the cultural and spiritual values we confer to water resources. Next slide, please. So there are different tools and approaches that we indigenous peoples use, but also that can be used for tracking and for accountability. I'm not going to go into detail, but it is important to also understand that we have our own ways of cooperation and our own diplomatic ways of solving things. So our indigenous diplomacy that is also it comes from times from immemorial times, and it's also an important point to explore in those spaces in which decisions are taking place. Of course, respect indigenous knowledge improves outcomes for adaptation and resilience, but there are some legal frameworks as well that are important to keep in mind during those times. Next slide, please. So to accelerate accountability for UN Water Conference next year or other conferences beyond, including climate change conferences, I emphasize the role of indigenous science diplomacy, which can operate at different levels. So one is indigenous diplomacy for indigenous science, or indigenous science in indigenous diplomacy, or indigenous science for indigenous diplomacy. Because of the time, I'm not going to explain what is this all about, but if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I will add my email in the chat, and I will be very happy to respond any further questions. And finally, few last comments is that it is important to prioritize indigenous knowledge and leadership in the design of these conferences, in the reporting and follow-up of events at every scale, and also to keep or to bring indigenous science and monitoring indigenous ways of monitoring water resources into the decision-making processes, into the policy and into the practice. So that's all from my side. So I'm very happy to keep in touch with you, and thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yolanda, for highlighting both the challenges faced by indigenous peoples, but also for providing us a clear way forward from your perspective. For the next part of the presentation, we'll focus on solutions from youth perspective. The first presentation will be by Mahlatse Nkosi. She's a research officer in inclusive agricultural finance at the International Water Management Institute. Mahlatse, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Mahlatse Nkosi. I am from the International Water Management Institute out of the South Africa office. Today, I will be presenting on the NDC Capacity Scorecard, which is a collaborative effort with the African Group of Negotiators Expert Support. When we developed this, it was based on understanding that capacity constraints hinder the effective and actionable implementation of NDC targets, and also understanding that climate adaptation and mitigation efforts are not streamlined across the different departments and ministries in African countries. So also with that, we wanted to encourage the strengthening of monitoring and evaluation in assessing how far you've come and how far you still need to go to achieve those targets. Next slide, please. So the rationale behind this is that the NDC Capacity Scorecard is designed to assist national stakeholders in African countries to assess the development and implementation of their nationally determined contributions, as well as developing possible strategies to bridge those capacity gaps. As you can see on this picture, what we are basically trying to understand is which constraints which fall under your technical institutional capacities, resource mobilization, and climate finance absorption hinder your ability to develop actionable yet ambitious NDC targets, so that you are able to develop, or rather with us, co-create strategies that will build that bridge and allow you to effectively implement those NDCs. Next slide, please. How this scorecard works is in a four-part process where you then go on the scorecard and you visit 3 of our dashboards, but the main 2 being the implementation, the development of your NDCs, assessing the development of your NDCs, and the implementation that helps you to identify your constraints and then aligns with development strategies that will shift you from development to implementation and allow you to create implementable actions within that targeting. And also the reason why the Agnes partnership has been so important to us is the work that they've already done on the African continent in terms of negotiations in these various climate events. And it is to also ensure that there is knowledge sharing that is fostered between these different countries. Next slide, please. So how the tool functions is that there's 3 dashboards: implementation, development, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. And these are interactive dashboards which track your development and your implementation capacity of your NDCs. And then this will help you to identify gaps by pinpointing areas that need your capacity strengthening in terms of your technical, governance, monitoring and evaluation, and your financial constraints. Thereafter, there's a report that is meant to provide actionable insights to identify those key gaps and understanding where your strengths lie and where the weaknesses. So through various workshops from both IMI and Agnes, the team has introduced the NDC Capacity Scorecard from an individual person perspective. And And this has been to minister representatives, NDC focal points, civil society, and researchers. And in that, so far, we have been able to expose this tool to 23 countries in Africa out of the 54 and to 48 organizations. And now some of the feedback we've received from these individual interactions is that we need to update the NDC to be more sector specific to support each country's varied sector focuses. Additionally, we've also been asked to diversify the key focus areas, which is our finance aspect, technical, governance, and monitoring and evaluation to be complementary to the context of those specific countries. And also currently we have a desktop version. We've also been asked to make it more friendly through a mobile version and be more specific in terms of affiliations. Are we specifically looking at governments, or can the guys who do the technical on the ground implementation be the ones who give the feedback in terms of the progress? So right now, next steps for us is that we have identified a country where we are looking to do a full-scale pilot. Like I've previously mentioned, we have exposed it to individuals, but now we want to do the focus on a specific country. And the reason for that is we would, as Imi and Agnes, it is to assist in finalizing that specific country's NDC 3.0 and also to design implementation strategies to assist them in tracking towards the 5-year period where you have to update. And that is it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Such a timely activity to actually be done. As we all know, COP30 is fast approaching with new and improved NDCs and ambitious NDCs at the heart of COP30. So thank you very much for this presentation. I now move on to Leah Jones-Crank, who's an assistant professor at the University of Waterloo. Leah, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, thank you. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about some research that I've done, analyzing the outcomes from the UN 2023 Water Conference and how we can look forward to the 2026 Water Conference in the context of water, energy, and food nexus interactions. So we know that in 2023 at the Water Conference in New York, there were over 800 different commitments that were made on water. And while many of these commitments were made by Global South nations and by non-governmental organizations, only about 78 of them explicitly considered water, energy, and food nexus interactions. And so the water, energy, food nexus, or also called the WEF nexus, is just the interactions, trade-offs, and interconnections between these three resources and their related governance sectors. And as we've been talking about throughout this week, we can't think about water as being in a silo, but as existing across various different sectors and spaces. And so decision-making at high-level conferences water conferences specifically, needs to consider climate, energy, food, land, and these different interconnections. So a paper that I published recently, there's a citation at the bottom, examined all 835 commitments in the Water Action Agenda that emerged from the 2023 conference. And so some key highlights from those findings were that most WEF Nexus commitments, most of the commitments related to the water, energy, food nexus, were provided by non-governmental organizations and governments. So that suggests that there's opportunity for water, energy, and food stakeholder inclusion, but also that some key actors, especially actors on the ground like farmers, small-scale water providers, and energy utilities, may still be left out. Additionally, my results found that about 96% of the commitments that discussed the water, energy, food nexus included multiple SDGs, so almost 100%, as compared to about 76% of the commitments overall. So specifically, the commitments focused on the WEF nexus were just more integrated than the overall distribution of commitments. And finally, qualitatively, many of these commitments discuss the need for governance collaboration between water, energy, food, and other stakeholders through policy and decision-making, but often the how about how that would actually happen was quite lacking. And we know that stakeholder inclusion is a really important step in integrating these three sectors within governance. And so when we think about what that integration might actually look like on the ground, some previous research that I did about 5 years ago looked at Arizona and the United States. So I looked at the drought contingency plan, which was a process done in 2019 to develop a statewide plan about how to respond in the face of drought. And so this specific planning process brought together a variety of different stakeholders, including farmers, energy utilities, local water providers, urban municipalities, and others to plan for the distribution of water by sector under a future drought scenario. And so in many ways, this is kind of considered a success for local level governance on water, energy, and food nexus collaboration, because it did bring together a really broad range of stakeholders, as I just mentioned, which also included Indigenous stakeholders, environmental NGOs, and many others. However, there were, and they all were able to have a somewhat equal space at the table. Additionally, they were successful in negotiating trade-offs where there were winners in many different spaces and not clear losers, where there was a split between how water was going to be shared between farmers and municipalities, two of the main users of water in the area, while Indigenous communities continued to maintain their authority and rights over water as well. And finally, there were high levels of public engagement and transparency. The meetings were all open and available for people to view virtually. They were recorded with meetings, and there was overall transparency, which helped to improve accountability and trust in the overall process. And so this provides a small case study example of what governance can look like that is more inclusive and helps us to think about water, energy, and food negotiations together. So when we think about looking towards the 2026 conference, I have 3 specific recommendations. So first is thinking about pre-conference meetings. And we've talked about this a little bit yesterday, but thinking about establishing conversations and roundtables that are happening even before the conference starts, and that one of those potential topics can be thinking about nexus connections, which yes, could be water, energy, and food, but also water and climate, water and land, and thinking about how water intersects with these other spaces. Additionally, during the conference, it's important to facilitate dialogue on nexus interactions at local, regional, and global scales. And I'm also very excited that in thinking about the themes for the UN 2026 conference, water, energy, food nexus interactions has been identified as a key area under one of those themes. And then finally, post-conference, we want to think about how we integrate the nexus explicitly into commitments and targets and reporting. And this doesn't mean that the water, energy, food nexus needs to be presented everywhere, but that it should be present across those commitments. And so with that, I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat.
Thank you, Leah. And I do hope that the output of this research would actually inform the next conferences, particularly in the next UN Water Conference. With that, I move on to Elin Adolfsson. She's a consultant at the Global Commission on the Economics of Water Secretariat. Elin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mustafa, and it's a true pleasure to be here, and especially among such inspiring colleagues. So I will start to talk about what the Global Commission on the Economics of Water puts forward as an intergenerational approach to water, and why that can be considered a precondition to succeed on the water, climate, as well as the biodiversity agenda. You can see in front of you here a slide. I know there's a lot going on this slide, and it's a summary of what I will speak about. So my suggestion would be to take a screenshot or a photo, or perhaps scan the QR code to get the brief and save that for later. But to start, I just wanted to give a very brief context that an intergenerational approach to water, the way it is put forward by the Commission, is rooted in the idea that an integrated climate, water, and nature crisis feature inter- and intergenerational dimensions. So for instance, we know that if we do not act on water and climate, this will cost us 10% of the GDP by 2050. And this is a cost that is transferred into the future and will be predominantly paid by younger and future generations. So adopting an intergenerational approach means acknowledging these dimensions, which of course intersects with gender, socioeconomic factors, etc., but doing this by leveraging the unique and potential of each generation in a mutually cooperative sense. So in practice, this means that when we're implementing these commitments that we made at the global level, we must be integrating both intra and intergenerational perspectives. And this is both into how we diagnose the challenges, as well as develop solutions, how we implement them, and of course, also track them. So this way, by adopting an approach that recognizes the perspectives of young people and future generations and their needs, it forces us to think long term. It forces us to think more systemically, and it also forces us to think of equity. And this way, it enables a just pathway to more prosperous and resilient societies. And I will try to make this a bit more tangible with two examples going into employment and digitalization. So I will start with jobs. So in countries where the economy is highly dependent on clean and blue water, water scarcity or flooding is a challenge to employment. And this is across sectors. So energy, manufacturing, tourism, also agriculture. So for example, in the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, agriculture makes up around 10% of the GDP and employs over 30% of the workforce. So this is, as you can see, a very critical pillar to the economy, and disruptions to the water cycle and the implications that has for climate mitigation and adaptation that put both current but also increasingly future jobs at risk. So this is a concern, but by making this analysis, we can also see that the job market itself emerges as a solution space. So by creating employment opportunities for young people that enhances hydrological and climate resilience, this could benefit both intergenerational justice as well as economic stability. I'm moving on now to the example of digitalization, because this is another area where youth play a key role. So we know that there are major gaps in green and blue water data, and this, of course, hampers tracking of the commitments that have been made. And young people, they bring digital fluency and skills that can be used to leverage digital tools to innovate in data collection and analysis. And this we actually saw just at the Stockholm Junior Water Prize. But youth also brings knowledge in communication and personalizing water and climate stories to influence public awareness. And this is something I think is particularly important considering the narrative-driven environment that we are currently living in. And a last point on digitalization is also that this digital innovation can be mobilized to support democratization and inclusion, so the youth can take part of the data, of the information, and thereby also be more proactive engaged in water and climate, as well as assert accountability towards older generations. So these are two examples. There are many more areas that this perspective unravels, but just to a final words that implementing an intergenerational approach in this way requires cooperation across generations. So like women alone can achieve gender equality, youth alone can achieve intergenerational equity. So this must come from a place of cooperation from global to local levels, and where we ensures accountability for future generations. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Very interesting presentation and a very strong message at the end as well. I now move on to Martina Klein. She's a senior manager and advisor on climate, water, and peace at the Stockholm International Water Institute.
Thank you, Mustafa. I hope you can all hear me. I think we wanted to include this issue related to disinformation and misinformation in our session or in the whole seminar series, because we feel it is really directly affecting outcomes of global climate and water conferences. And I would like to show you a little bit how, but we really feel very passionate about this topic. So As you know that different disinformation and fake news are very common on climate change, I would just like to use this opportunity to make a distinction what is misinformation and what is disinformation. So misinformation is a correct information, which is however we use unintentionally in a different context. This is when we share content that is maybe not be false, but we share it in a irrelevant content. And then disinformation that is particularly designed to foster mistrust, to foster polarization, and to really spread the wrong information about certain issue. And now I will dive a little bit deeper how we see this issue. You see that the World Economic Forum, in its latest analysis of global risk, actually ran misinformation and disinformation as the highest, most immediate risk, and it ranks as 5 on the long-term 10 years risk. Important to also see that issues related to extreme weather events that are directly related to climate and water are immediately after, and then they are number 1 on the 10-year risk. So we see these two issues intermittently connected. And we really would like to show how. I think the main aspect is that because these different influence campaigns affect so much public opinion, it really limits the space in which decision makers can negotiate, because many are directly dependent on public opinion. So this is one of the reasons. And just to give a little bit, a few examples of how these processes are affected by these campaigns. There is something called Climate Action Against Disinformation. And it's very encouraging to hear that actually from the upcoming COP, this platform has more interest, and there are also different member states supporting it. And there was in March, there was a meeting between state actors, NGOs, who are really aligning and working together to work with this very, very important hindrance to climate negotiation. When we look at the presence of fossil lobbies at different COPs, we see that it really peaked during the COP in Dubai, and then the last COP was 1,800. Interesting when we analyze, there was analysis of post about COP27. So we see that they identified that there were actually 12 key super spreaders of disinformation, and that drove 440,000 shares. And interesting, according to MIT study, we see that actually false news are 70% more likely to be retweeted. So they actually reach more people, and I will show later how this is all designed. And we also have a very interesting study from 2019. So this is pre-COVID. So I think the reality has changed quite a bit after that, that the disinformation, they cost annually economic loss is approximately $78 billion US, and that is counting the drop of stock markets, affecting the way how people invest. But also how people take medical recommendations. But this is of course changing when we also see influx of disinformation focused on climate action, and that is again limiting some governments to take more prominent action on these issues. One of the suggestions, and this is something that we've been working with at SIWI, is how to address this issue. And we've been coining this term, communication resilience, because experience and research suggests it's very difficult to respond to in every type of fake news, but we need to increase our communication resilience. That means we need to increase our ability to become more aware of information influence, identify these campaigns, and adopt appropriate countermeasures. And these tools include, so we need to really work on creating networks between different actors so they can verify news. We need to work on the networks between negotiators to be able to check different stories coming from different countries before they really reach these levels in the way how they are shared. We also need to work on capacity development with governments, help, for example, Waterline and other technical ministries think of the way how they communicate about the increased uncertainty that we are seeing, how they communicate about the needs to adopt very unpopular measures, and how do they communicate about the challenges that we are seeing. And we really see that this is essential to allow the enabling environment for climate and water negotiation. And we also need to be more clear how we communicate about uncertainty. And then organizations like SIWI, platforms like the World Water Week can certainly play a role. We can make data more accessible. This also includes the human accessibility. We need to train more people how to understand different types of data that we now have available thanks to our technological advantages. And we also need to work on shared vocabulary, because many of the misunderstandings happen that different actors have different understanding of different terms, and we've heard it in our first session, but this is also something that we need to reflect on. And then when we think about how we create content, we need to think for whom the content is created and by whom. And I think this very much links to, for example, what Dr. Yolanda was saying about this indigenous science. Also very much be thinking, how do we create the content? Because by creating accessible content, we also minimize the space in which disinformation and information influence campaigns thrive. And at the end, I would like to show you a disinformation kill chain. This is something how the disinformation happen. We see that the first, those who design these campaigns, they find cracks. They find when there is not clear or enough information, or there is polarity in society. They build content around it. Then they launch campaigns, and they use then real people who copy and fertilize it. That's how the news spreads. So they use real accounts who spread the news. And then they also use the super accounts, the people who then spread these messages through this network. It's always something very easy, simple to understand, and it directly addresses to the concerns, because they don't need to develop anything new. They are not working on the science. They only work on the information campaigns. And then they reaps the results. We would be, of course, very much interested in hearing from you, your experience with these problems. And I can say that SIWI will continue working with this important issue. So thank you.
Thank you, Martina. Very interesting numbers and statistics, and excellent visuals as well, but also very strong messages. This was the last presentation from our speakers, and now I will move to our session discussion. Juan Carlos Sanchez Ramirez from the International Water Management Institute. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, colleagues. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here with you and to be able to share some of the reflections that come out of this very important seminar series. I think first of all we need to recognize the time of the seminar series. It's very important that finally we have captured a sentiment that has been among many of us on this need to move from planning and from discussing to action. So I would like to really commend the organizers and the conveners for pushing this agenda forward and making sure that we are held accountable to the different promises that have been made throughout the years on these topics of water and the agenda of water and climate. I think it's also very important to recognize the leadership of the UAE moving forward towards 2026, but at the same time make sure that we understand that the time is running out. So again, coming to that very first point, that we need to start seeing some action on the ground is really fundamental and critical as we move forward. I want to also refer to the summary of ideas that we have seen throughout these three different and very enlightening sessions, and I would cluster them around four ideas. The first one is implementation of existing legal frameworks. We have seen and we have discussed already the importance of different multi-scale governance systems that allow for the rules of the game to be carried forward, and when they are not there, well, we also need to work on filling those gaps. There's an element of innovation. We have seen, particularly on the last presentations in this session, different tools that are out there for ensuring that that we do implement existing agreements. There's a call for action. There's no time to be lost. We need to start moving and to start seeing actual change on the ground. And of course, we need to do it in a way that it's inclusive, which is also part of the important messages that our colleague Yolanda Lopez and she was referring to the roles of indigenous peoples and other groups that traditionally have been left out of the conversation. So just to conclude, I would like to say that moving forward, we need to make sure that we bring all of these results, all of these outcomes into the different themes for and looking forward to the UN Water Conference in 2026. And I think with that also give all of you an invitation to continue working with us. I don't think this is the end of the conversation. Actually, we want to continue working with all of you. And it's very important that we actually grow and continue working on a coalition of organizations and of individuals that are highly motivated to make sure that we move from promises to action. With that, I would like to give back the floor to the chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. We're over time, so I'll pass it on to some of my colleagues, Leah, Martina, Mathis, and Inga for the wrap up of all three sessions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mustafa, for facilitating this seminar today. So we are over time, so we don't want to spend much more time, but we do just want to wrap up a bit about our whole seminars. We have had 3 different sessions. So as we look back across these 3 different sessions that we've had over the past 3 days, there are a lot of common themes that we've seen coming out across these sessions. So first is that we've seen the importance of linking global processes and global bilateral meetings and multilateral meetings to national priorities and then down to local action, and how that can increase cohesion for water policy and water action across multiple different governance levels. Second, we've seen how financing, connecting to sectors beyond water, partnerships with bottom-up collective action, and evidence are key factors for successful accountability in the implementation of outcomes from these water and climate conferences. And third, we've seen how developing tools for measuring water accountability, especially today, as we've seen the NDC scorecard, the water tracker yesterday, hearing more about the different tools in the Limcom Basin and in the Dniester Basin, could help us to have greater accountability in water and climate commitments and approaches for tracking these commitments made through the global processes, and how that can help to improve accountability and follow up from water and climate conferences. So with that, I would like to thank the Scientific Program Committee, which includes myself, Martina Klimas, Inga Jacobs-Mata, and Mata Samel, but also our co-conveners, UNECE, UNEP, the Diplomatic Academy of the UAE, and IMWE as well, and for all of our wonderful co-convening partners who have put so much effort into this seminar. So we thank you all so much for being here today. And with that, we will close.